The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
All right, before we get into the stories on today's bonus show, real quick, I do this every once in a while when we have a new advertiser. We do have a new advertiser that's just advertising on today's show. It's a t-shirt manufacturer named Nerd Kung Fu. They've got sci-fi t-shirts, comic book t-shirts, movie-related t-shirts, all that stuff. They sent me one, which I will be wearing when we record the actual ad for them. And I'm a big Arthur C. Clarke fan, as Pat knows, or maybe he doesn't know. It doesn't really matter either way. He does know. He says he knows. So I got a 2001 A Space Odyssey t-shirt. And I would love for Nerd Kung Fu to become like a regular advertiser with us. So what I'm asking you for, as people who, as members, I know care about the financial solvency of the program, consider checking out nerdkungfu.com. We have this code PAKMAN101, and that'll save you 10% off of your orders. And if you find a t-shirt you like, whatever the theme may be, pick up a t-shirt. These make good gifts. Funny shirts, I feel like, are good gifts for, in general, right? I mean, you know, a clever shirt or a shirt related to some show or movie or book or comic book or video game that people like. Those are good gifts.
Yeah, easy to do when you're shopping, I think.
Exactly. Right? Absolutely. An easy thing to pick up because you don't have to think too hard. It's a t-shirt. If you see, oh, I know someone who likes 2001 A Space Odyssey, I get him the 2001 A Space Odyssey t-shirt. Very, very straightforward. Exactly. That's what Pat does on a daily basis. Oh, and the t-shirts are vegan, just so you know. That's the thing. Pat's laughing, but there's a whole thing around, is the clothing vegan?
So there's no wool, there's no leather, there's no down.
I have no idea.
Okay, yeah, so we don't even know for sure.
But I'll toss the shirt over there, and then we will deal with what it means to be vegan clothing, maybe after the bonus show. Okay, so remember when so actually, I need to go back even further. Elizabeth Warren has had sort of a up and down, tumultuous relationship with how the DNC, an erratic relationship to how the DNC handled the primary in 2016. On the one hand, she has sort of been criticized because she waited until it was too late for Bernie Sanders to win to eventually say that she was politically closest to Bernie Sanders. And Cenk Uygur asked her a good question when he interviewed her, which was, well, why didn't you come out earlier and say I support Bernie? And we didn't really get a clear answer. Then we heard from Donna Brazile last week, late the week before, early last week, that she believes the primary was completely rigged. And those allegations exploded, and they saw Massachusetts Democratic Senator Elizabeth Warren say, I agree it was rigged. But then, as some of the sort of edges of Donna Brazile's story were tapered in, where yes, she was describing what took place, but in a sort of maybe slightly more hyperbolic way than we initially thought was accurate from the headlines, at least, around her claims. Elizabeth Warren has pulled back a little bit, and she is now saying that the DNC did show some bias, but that the selection process has been fair. Listen, I like Elizabeth Warren. I agree with the assessments that I believe are accurate, which are that she's the second most progressive senator in the Senate, behind only Bernie Sanders. I agree with her on a lot of policy. She's been on our program, all of that stuff. But I believe she is really trying to sit on the fence and find the exact way to thread the needle on the DNC rigging issue to seem as though she is kind of sending a signal to the Bernie supporters that I get what went on, but at the same time, not really trying to shake up the Democratic establishment by just saying it was completely rigged and unfair.
Well, I think her handlers got to her eventually because she did this interview with CNN's Jake Tapper.
Yeah.
And I think she was just trying to wordsmith around it, saying, yeah, there was definitely bias, but it wasn't necessarily rigged. And then Jake Tapper, I think he's a pretty good journalist.
I think so.
Flat out said, do you think that the Democratic primary was rigged? And in this moment of being candid, she said yes.
Right.
And now she's walked it back, and I think it has to do with the fact that she's probably going to run in 2020.
Well, that may be. I mean, it's interesting that you say that it's her handlers that got to her. That may be true, but she at least does have, she's able to tie her position to the fact that her initial reaction was based on the first Donna Brazile headlines.
Yeah.
But then when we learned more about it, it seemed like she may have slightly exaggerated so that she pulled it back. So it may well be that it is something that she got together with her team and they said, listen, This is not going over well. This is going to hurt your potential donor opportunities if you do run in 2020. So that you may be 100% right, but she has this plausible deniability where she can say, listen, the claims from Donna Brazile ended up not being 100% of what she originally said they were. And it does provide some cover for her, unfortunately.
Yeah, and it's just upsetting not to see her as a leader on this topic,
I agree.
right?
I
mean,
completely
as you
agree.
mentioned, second most progressive Senate and possibly a candidate in 2020.
She would be,
I hope
think,
she runs.
Unless Bernie runs.
Yeah.
Who would be more progressive than her on the Democratic side?
Or more electable, I would argue.
Or
too.
more electable.
Yeah.
Female,
on who you ask, I
female
guess.
senators from Massachusetts. Depends who you ask, right? If you talk to the people who are saying they are more likely to vote for Roy Moore after he was accused of child sexual assault, they probably don't see Elizabeth Warren as too electable. But I think that there's going to be some interesting conversations to have when it's time to have them. And I've said I'm not talking about 2020 yet, although Pat tried to pull me into it. But you can talk about it. I'm not going to. So Uber now has plans to bring its on-demand ride service to Los Angeles, but not to the Los Angeles roads. It's already on the Los Angeles roads, to do it in the sky with flying taxis. There was an event called the Lisbon Web Summit where Uber announced that it is intending to build a network of flying taxis within Los Angeles by 2020. And they've signed an agreement. Well, I guess NASA has signed the agreement to develop a specialized air traffic control system for these taxis, according to Uber's chief product officer, Jeff Holden. And I know every time I talk about this, I'll get emails, not so much from our bonus show audience, but from if and when we talk about this on the regular show. David, none of this stuff is ever happening. The same way people have been telling me for 5 years, there's never going to be autonomous vehicles. And of course, we have autonomous vehicles. At some point, we're going to have some version of this, particularly now with drone technology, with the quadcopter technology, because one of the real impediments to the acceleration of so-called flying cars, at least when it comes to low orbit cars, has been that with traditional airplane type vehicles where you need to take off you can't do a vertical takeoff. It's only horizontal takeoff. You need a runway. And of course, as soon as you lose speed, you lose lift and you can crash. If you're going to have all of that going on above city streets, for example, that presents a very particular type of danger. When you can think about doing a flying taxi that's like basically a big drone, right? A quadcopter with
it takes off like a helicopter.
Vertical takeoff. Mm-hmm. You were definitely reducing. Of course, all four of those rotors could fail at once. You could run out of power or whatever, the entire thing falls down. But once you can do vertical takeoff, you are no longer as concerned about what if traffic gets congested and these things have to slow down because they can hover.
Well, apparently there's no single component on these that could fail, leading to a failure of the entire aircraft.
It'd have to be a failure of a bunch of systems at the same time, I guess, is the idea.
In a short commute, right? I mean, this is only intended to go several miles at a time.
Yeah. I love this stuff. I don't know. I know people think that this is crazy, but I just love the idea of this. And I know that there are logistical problems and it'll be probably reserved for the very, very wealthy, but maybe not. I mean, you can already get like an Uber helicopter ride in New York from Manhattan to, I think it's LaGuardia or JFK, for $195. It's like helicopter Uber, which is a crazy amount for like a 4-minute ride or something like that. But still, if that's already down to $195, it's certainly reasonable that if this quadcopter flying taxi drone technology develops, the prices might not be that crazy.
Yeah, maybe I'm one of these naysayers on this though, because 2020 just sounds a little bit too early for me.
It sounds very soon. Yeah,
and
I know.
Not because we don't have the technology, just because it seems like having the infrastructure of being able to land these things on so many rooftops throughout Los Angeles as they want to try it out on. It just seems like we're not going to be ready.
It feels ambitious, but I like ambition.
Yeah.
It is like 25 months away, the beginning of 2020. And if you're talking about the end of 2020, you're talking about 37 months. So yeah, it feels soon, but I'm interested in it. I'll be following it. And I have no disclosures to make about stock ownership of any kind related to this. I can't think of any company that people probably hear me talking enthusiastically and they're like, he must have some stock ownership he's not disclosing. I've got nothing. Unless
you did take an Uber once, didn't you?
I once did take an Uber. Yes. That's my only involvement. Hey, this is a really interesting thing. So the iPhone X has been released, and there's these funny videos of people. I don't know if you saw these, Pat, but like one guy stood in line and got one of the first iPhone X's, opened it, and immediately dropped it on the floor. It didn't break, but just the video of it is hilarious. And I kind of felt bad for the guy. And now, bad news for Apple. A Vietnamese security firm says that it has tricked the facial recognition software The iPhone X has technology where you can unlock the phone basically by looking into it, and it recognizes your face, it maps your face, and it determines, is that really you? And a Vietnamese software company has made a really creepy looking mask which tricked the system. And the mask is weird. It looks similar to the one that you wore on Halloween, Pat, actually, and I think our audience will be interested to see that. But it is a very bizarre looking mask. And, you know, now everybody is saying, well, let's figure it out and see exactly what happened here, because if you can crack it so easily, was it that the mask looked like the person whose face was the password, or is it that something about this particular mask would unlock any iPhone X because it triggers some kind of confusion in the algorithm? It's all being researched, but not the best news for Apple.
Yeah, because I guess even if you have a set of identical twins, they can't unlock the other person's phone.
Supposedly.
Which is interesting, and I guess the chances of just doing it at random with any old person off the street is maybe 1 in a million.
Yeah.
I think in the presentation, too, it failed. The guy had to just put in like a manual number password because it didn't recognize his face in the presentation.
Oh,
that's
saying
pretty bad PR.
Not with the mask, but when somebody was demoing the way it actually
X.
is supposed to work, it failed and the guy had to unlock with a
Totally
password.
embarrassing.
That's not good. This is when I'm glad that I'm not an iPhone guy.
Yeah.
Although it's so stupid because things can happen with Android phones too.
And I guess Android has had this for a number of years now, but
Oh, really?
it was a lot easier to trick. You could just put up a photograph of someone in front of the phone and that would recognize it.
Interesting. Yeah, I've had Android phones for a long time. I've got the S8 now, and I just have the fingerprint unlock, which works pretty well. I mean, I feel like it doesn't work well in the sense that I almost put on like a different part of my finger, and it still unlocks immediately. So I wonder whether someone else could easily unlock it. But I've given it to other people to try, and it never has let anybody else in.
I don't lock my phone.
Oh, you don't lock it at all?
No.
Huh. I think that's bad.
And-
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, my justification maybe is that if I ever lose it, maybe I would want someone to get into it so they could find my contacts and, you know, get it back to me somehow.
Well, you'd be able
Good
to
Samaritan.
call the phone and then they'd
That's
still
true.
be able to pick it up.
Yeah.
I don't know.
It just seems annoying to me
to have it locked.
to have to unlock it all
You
the
get
time.
used to it. I mean, having to type in a password is different, but I can just pick it up and just put my finger right on the back and the thing unlocks. So it's really not a huge pain.
Okay.
I would look into that. Okay, that's it for the bonus show today.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.